Let me tell you something that took me a while to learn. Planning content for the week sounds simple when people say it out loud. You hear things like just batch your content or just schedule your posts. But the reality is, when you are the person actually doing the work, it's not always that straightforward. There was a time when my week felt so chaotic. I would open my laptop on Monday morning with the intention of being productive, and the first question in my mind would be, what am I supposed to post today? And once that question starts repeating itself every day, content creation stops feeling strategic and starts feeling like pressure. I remember one particular week where I had been posting consistently. I had content going out regularly. The visuals looked clean and the captions were decent, but something wasn't sitting right with me. The engagement was there, but the conversations weren't. No thoughtful replies, no meaningful DMs, no real signal that the content was actually moving anyone closer to working with me. At first, I thought maybe I just needed to post more. You know how it is online? When something doesn't work, the default advice is always be more consistent. So I tried that. More posts, more efforts, more time spent staring at a blank page, trying to come up with something clever to say. And instead of feeling more productive, I felt more exhausted. That was the moment I realized something important. The problem wasn't that I wasn't posting enough. The problem was that I was planning posts, not planning outcomes. And those two things are completely different. Once I saw that, the way I approached my weekly content changed entirely. Now, when I sit down to plan my week, the first thing I ask myself isn't what I should post. The real question is, what thinking do I want to influence this week? Because content, especially on social media, isn't just about putting information out there. It's about shaping how people understand a problem. So instead of writing random posts, I started structuring my week around roles that each piece of content would play. For example, at the beginning of the week, I usually focus on positioning content. That's the type of content that helps people understand how I see the industry. It shows my perspective. It gives people a sense of the way I think about strategy and growth. Then there is problem awareness content. This is where I talk about challenges that many founders or creators are already experiencing, but might not have clearly articulated yet. When someone reads it, they should feel like, yes, that's exactly what I've been struggling with. That moment of recognition is powerful because it makes the reader feel understood. And once someone feels understood, they become much more open to hearing your perspective. Then I include authority building content. This isn't about bragging or listing achievements. It's about showing the thinking process behind the work, sharing insights, breaking down strategies, explaining the reason behind certain decisions. People trust you more when they can see how you think. Finally, I like to end the week with conversation driven content, something that invites reflection, a question, a perspective, or a story that encourages people to respond and share their own experiences. Because at the end of the day, social media isn't about broadcasting messages, it's about starting conversations. And conversations are where real opportunities begin. Now, here's something interesting I've noticed since I started planning content this way. Creating content actually became easier, not because the work disappeared, but because the pressure to come up with something disappeared. Instead of forcing ideas, I already knew the role each piece of content was supposed to play. And when you know the role, the message becomes much clearer. Another thing that changed was the quality of engagement. Instead of quick reactions, people started responding with more thoughtful comments. DMs became more intentional. People would reference something I wrote in a caption or a post and say, that made me rethink how I'm approaching my content. Those are the moments that remind me why strategy matters so much. Because some content that simply informs might get attention, but content that shifts someone's thinking, that's what creates action. And that's really the core philosophy I carry into my work. Content shouldn't just create engagement, it should guide someone through a small shift in perspective. Maybe it helps them see their problem more clearly. Maybe it introduces a new way of approaching something. Or maybe it makes simply makes them realize that the challenge they are facing has a solution. When you approach content from that angle, the goal stops being posting regularly. The goal becomes creating impact. And interestingly enough, that approach also protects your energy because instead of constantly chasing the next idea, you are working within a system, a structure that supports you, a rhythm that makes the process sustainable. So if you ever feel overwhelmed trying to keep up with content, I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself a different question. Instead of asking, what should I post this week? Ask yourself, what kind of thinking do I want to influence this week? That small shift in perspective can change everything. Now I'm curious about you. When you plan your content, are you thinking about the role each piece of content plays, or are you just filling the calendar with posts? I'd love to hear your approach.